All right. So all these component lifecycle. Well, before we jump into that, someone wanted to talk about destructuring using class-based components. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yep. So when destructuring using class-based components, you would do the destructuring down in the render function. So for example, if I wanted to render or extract the title, the title and from this dot state, I can run say const title. I might get an error here, but we'll see. Equals this dot state dot data. So if I look over here, so if I grab that, let's just see if I get any errors here. So it looks like I do get an error because I'm trying to destructure title when the state data is null. So I can say like, do something like if state data like so. Let's see if this works. There we go. So as long as you're whatever you're trying to destructure, for example, maybe props, just make sure that that value that you're trying to destructure is there before you're trying to extract whatever values or destructure it. So I'm just saying, hey, if the state data has a value, then destructure it. So with that, instead of using this dot state dot data, I can get rid of the this dot state. I can just, or I can say this dot state data. So if there's values there, then I can just extract the title. This should work. Let's see, maybe not. So data. Yeah, I guess not. But yeah, essentially you would just do the same thing. You would just destructure everything in the render. It's more when you have like props data is when you would do it.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Cool. Let's just go back to just make sure everything's still working. Refresh. Cool. So now I can just keep going to the next item. I could also have a back button that toggles it backwards if I wanted to, but yeah. So this is just grabbing all the titles. If I wanted to, I could also just like P ID. So I can add all those attributes to that. So I've got title with an ID of 1. Let's actually just make all these H3s. User. There we go. Does it not have user ID? User ID. Like so. So now you can kind of see it actually changing the ID, which is corresponds to the page. And the user ID. Cool. So all these component life cycles in class-based components, since React is moving towards functional or has moved towards functional-based components, they needed something in functional-based components to handle different, essentially replace or these component lifecycle methods. And that is a nice, easy, single to use. I don't want to say easy, but a single component or a single function called the useEffect hook. So what I'm going to do is copy this down, convert it to a functional base component. So I'm going to do const child equals component, but it should take some props like so. So I don't need the constructor anymore. I could just do const data set data equals use state, and it's initially is null. At the very top, I'm going to have to import the use state hook, and I might as well import the use effect hook as well. So there we go. So I'm going to, in place of this component did mount, I'm just going to copy it. I'm going to need that fetch. So I can say use effect. So use effect takes in an anonymous function like so. So this function is invoked at different points in the component's lifecycle based on different criteria. And it also takes in what element do you want, what variable do you want to have this use effect hook to keep an eye on? And when that use effect or when that variable changes, we want this to be called. So if I only want it to act just like a component did mount, I can have an empty array here because it's not looking at anything. It's not looking at any variables. So this use effect hook is always called right when the component mounts once, always. It just automatically is called. So I'm just going to console log mounted like so. And I'm just going to comment out the component did update. I'm going to get rid of the render method. And that should be it. I've got one warning. That's fine. So if I refresh, oh, I got a bunch of errors. Oh, state. So this dot state dot data. I don't need that anymore. Like so. There we go. Cool. So this render is being called right there. So that's like where the render method would be. And then this use effect hook is called. It's called mounted. So when it's mounted, we can run through that fetch API. So to grab some data. But instead of this dot set state post data, we can just call set data equals post data. And now it kind of works. So initially calls the render, it's mounted, grabs some data, changes the state. We'll get rid of that. So sets some new data to state. So the state changes. So then it re-rendered again. Like so. All right. Questions on that? You can get into really big trouble with use effect by calling an infinite loop if you don't have certain. So notice how that is an infinite loop. It just keeps rendering. It's because that's state's changing. So it's fetching this. State is changing. It's calling this again. State's changing. It's calling this again. State's changing. So it's essentially an infinite loop of calling this API request infinitely. So you can get in trouble with the use effect hook with APIs because you'll inevitably get stuck in an infinite loop where you're calling an API and you're going to hit your maximum calls. You're going to hit the maximum limit, the API request limit for a specific API. Always happens. So when I click this next item, I want it to go to the next item. So what value or what value should the useEffect hook keep an eye on of changing to re-trigger this function? So when do we want this fetch API to re-trigger to grab the next item? I'm gonna call on somebody.
On the click of the button? Is that what you're looking for?
So yeah, so what is changing when I click that button?
There's a page number, I believe.
All right. And where am I getting that page number from in this child component, this functional based child component?
Props.
Exactly. So if I just console log props up here and refresh, so I get props like so. And if I click next item, here's props, page 2. So what in props should this useEffect hook keep an eye on? Props dot page. So when this value changes, it's going to trigger this function again. So click it, but nothing's actually happening. So let's see what's going on. Oh. So what's happening is I'm still just grabbing the post from post 1. So in here, I can say props.page. Props.page. Like so. So when I refresh that and I click next item, grabs ID of 2, next item, and now it's working. You can also add, like, if props.page does not equal I don't know, some value or state. So here's what else I can do. I can say, hey, if data.id does not equal page ID, then trigger this. And that should still work. Whoops. Uh-oh, what's happened? Oh yeah, because pages data is null. So that won't work unless I had a default state value for ID. But you can compare props and state, and various things will kick off. So everything is still working. And now I can get rid of all these. So this 5 lines of code, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, can replace this component did update function and this component did mount function in class-based components. You can also add next item. I can add like a back item. I can even just back item. If this page is greater than 1, see if that works. So if I click back, nothing's work. Everything still works. Cool. Any questions on the use effect hook? So another thing, you can add multiple things in here in this array to keep an eye on to trigger various parts of your use effect method. So use effect, you can add a bunch of logic in here. So like maybe if certain state data changes, like if data, yeah. Oh. I can keep track of data changes. And in here, I can say like, maybe I want to trigger that every time. But if data.id modulus 2 equals 0, is even, set is even, false. This set is even to see if so it doesn't necessarily need is even. Let's see if I can do this. I'm just riffing now. Is even. Oh, infinite loop. That's not good. Yeah, I was just riffing, whatever. Don't even, that's not necessarily that important. But yeah, you can trigger different stuff inside of this use effect method. You can also have more than one use effect hook. So if you don't want to have a list of different items, you can just have a separate use effect hook for each item. So you can have multiple use effect hooks. Console log. Second use effect. I'm just gonna. First. So we got first use effect and second use effect. So you can. So the first use effect hook is always executed, but the second one is only rendered once because it doesn't have a dependency inside of the array. All right. Any questions on that? No.
Tom, I have a question just on the last part. I was kind of thinking like scaffolding kind of those use effect with the different, that second parameter being different. At least in my mind, I was thinking that the empty array would fire if any of the components changed, but I think what you just demonstrated is not that. Is that-
Correct. Yeah, the empty array only fires once, right when it's mounted.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Yep.
So that handles did mount. Props.page handles did update. Is there one for did dismount?
Not that I know of. Like, let's just. I've actually never seen people use unmount before, unless there's use a. That's a good effect. And component. So did will unmount. Let's see, I think maybe the use effect already has like a built-in. As we learned earlier, effects can run and render. Yeah, so it really doesn't have an equivalent for the unmount. So it looks like there is a cleanup function. Let's see. Ooh. Yeah, essentially, I wouldn't worry about the unmount part of the use effect hook because I've actually never seen it in the production code, the unmount. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? No. All right.